I think I'm actually here.
Hey.
Morning, Senator.
Golly, I don't know what happened. It wouldn't let me in. Said I don't exist or something, I guess.
All right, Chairwoman
I
Ellis,
think I'm actually here.
you're live on YouTube. Morning, Senator.
Golly, I don't know what happened. It wouldn't let me in. Said I don't exist.
Senator Koch, you have to turn off that YouTube of yours.
Yep, Senator Koss, that would be my recommendation as well. Good morning, Senators. This is Tuesday, February 23rd. It's a meeting of Committee Number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources. We have one bill on our agenda today. Before we get to it, though, however, how about we take a roll?
Senator Guru,
Here.
Senator Landon,
Here.
Senator Salazar,
Here.
Senator Schuler,
Here.
Chairwoman Ellis,
Present.
5 present.
All righty. So this morning we have Senate File 88 on our agenda, and I just want to let the members of the public that are watching know we're doing a hybrid meeting. I'm here in the Capitol Meeting Room 2 today, but our other senators are meeting remotely. And so if we have any technical difficulties, please make sure you get my attention if you've been admitted, or our phone numbers or an email are all available. So let us know if you're trying to testify or participate. With that, we're hearing Senate File 88, which is ownership of fossils and artifacts. The bill's primary sponsor on the Senate side is Senator Kost, who is on board with us. Welcome. And I understand that Representative Flitner, who is also co-sponsoring the bill, is available to answer questions and offer some comments as well. So welcome, Representative. With that, I'd be happy to turn the microphone and time over to Senator Kost for an explanation of this bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I hope that it doesn't get an echo because I don't have anything on that would cause the echo, but I'm not going to make any promises. This morning's been kind of crazy. Madam Chairman and the members of the TRW committee, this bill is a bill that came about a couple of years ago. I had a constituent that had asked me if I would consider presenting this because in their process of having some fossils on their particular land, they had to go into court to get some things straightened out. At the time that they went into court to get things straightened out, the lawyers used the Montana statute as reference to make a decision on the reference here because we didn't have anything that necessarily covered it. So at that time, he had suggested to me maybe we use the Montana bill as a reference. We did use that. LSO worked with me on that, and we put together the bill. The bill basically is an act relating to fossilized animal remains discovered in the stratus below the surface of the lands and water of the state. Basically what it's talking about is who actually owns this particular fossil or whatever. At the time that I was working on this, I had no idea of the value of these fossils when discovered. I figured probably a few $1,000s or so maybe. We're talking with some of them in the millions, which really blew me away. I had no idea. So to go through the bill quickly, on page 1, it starts out with the act, and it says, an act relating to property and conveniences specifying ownership of fossils, artifacts, and non-fossilized animal remains discovered in split estates and providing for an effective date. So what was created was Wyoming Statute 34-1-154, ownership of fossils and artifacts. And basically the first part says the ownership of any fossil, artifact, non-fossilized animal remains discovered in the strata below the surface lands and waters of the state is vested in the owner of the surface estate unless otherwise conveyed by clear and express grant or governed by Wyoming Statute 74-106. So basically, this is saying that it's the owner of the surface estate, but 74-4-106 is archaeological human burial sites. And what this does is protects the burial sites and the human remains of other found individuals, and to show the respect of that and all. And so that particular statute is very important because it protects not only our indigenous population, but anybody else that may be found that was buried somewhere on land, and all of a sudden this has been discovered. So it's very important that that was put in there to protect that. B is talking about the definitions, and it talks about a fossil, meaning a fossilized remains, traces or imprints of organisms preserved on the Earth's crust that are of paleontological interest and that provide information about the history of life on Earth, but does not include oil, gas, or other hydrocarbons. Artifact, meaning any materials, remains of the past human life or human activities that are of archaeological interest. And Section 2 says this act shall apply to any existing or future transfer of ownership of the strata below the surface lands and waters of the state. And it is set of an effective date is July 1 of 2021. It's a real short bill. It's basically to the point of saying the landowner is the one that should realize the fossils. That's all there is to it. I would entertain any questions anybody may have if I'm capable of answering them.
Thank you, Senator Cost. Questions from the committee? Senator Landon?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So Senator, thanks for that. This is kind of an interesting little bill. I assume that the situation up north that one of your constituents ran into was a split estate. And I assume that they had the mineral rights and probably claimed that one of these fossilized remains was a mineral. Am I understanding the genesis of this bill?
Senator Cost?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Senator Landon, and I believe rather than that it was a mineral, it's a fossil discovered. And so it was a split estate, and it wasn't necessary going through the court actions to be able to come up with what it was. It wasn't a mineral, though. We're not associating it to minerals such as oil, gas, or any of that. So that was definitely kept separate. I hope that answered your questions.
Madam Chairman, it does. I just assumed that maybe whoever owned the mineral estate probably was claiming ownership to that fossilized remain, as opposed to whoever owned the surface estate. So I think I understand the bill correctly, but thank you, Senator.
Senator Cost, was that accurate?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, it is somewhat, to know the exact logistics, the person that owned it, there was a split estate, and I'm not sure exactly which one was claiming the mineral rights or whatever, but I do know that through the court, it was deemed that this person had the possession of the fossil remains. And so that was the impetus of the Montana bill that allowed them to make that claim. So this bill would replicate that same position.
Alrighty, any other questions for Senator Cost? Senator Schuler?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. When I was reading through the bill, one of the questions came up through my mind, and I'm not sure if this bill really answers it or not, or maybe if Senator Cost can, but I was thinking in terms of whenever we have folks that maybe are doing construction, particularly maybe road construction or whatever, through an area, and they come upon maybe some remains and find out, in fact, that maybe they were, of Native American descent. How does this bill maybe help a situation like that where maybe there isn't a clear-cut owner? Could you explain that maybe a little bit, Senator Cost?
Senator Cost?
Thank you, Madam Chairman and Senator Schuler. Actually, yes. First of all, the Wyoming statute 74106 covers any situation such as our American population or anybody else that would be found as human remains. The other is in the land where, say, there's a road being built or something, the possession of that would probably go to the state. And I do know that there's a breakdown of what the state receives as far as the separation between the state and whoever's finding it and whoever owned the land. So that I think is covered in the archaeological part of 74106, but it's pretty well protected that way. So it's not just all of a sudden somebody can dig up, find a fossil, and now they're rich, so to speak. Does that answer your question, ma'am?
Senator Schuler?
Yes, thank you very much. I think that pretty much covers it. Appreciate it.
Okay, any other questions for Senator Cost? Thank you, Senator Cost. If you don't mind staying on board with us, in case some additional questions pop up, we'd appreciate it. I see my co-chair on the TRW committee, Representative Chairwoman Flitner. Welcome. Do you want to offer some remarks on this bill?
Madam Chairman, thank you. I do not, other than I would urge your support. And I do know that these sites, these archaeological digs can be a real, they can go on for years and years. And the landowners there's a lot of activity and a lot of trespass involved with, digging up these sites. And so I think it's important that they stay with the landowner. And I would just urge your support.
Thank you. Any questions for Co-Chairwoman Flitner? Okay. Seeing none, I think we have, Senator Grew.
Sorry, Madam Chair, Co-Chair Flitner. I just had a question. I just want to make sure I have this right. I mean, this seems. I mean, I when I read this, I think, so I'm walking along my property out ranching and I see a rock and there's a fossilized remain in the rock, and that's my rock, and it's partially in the ground, and so that's the way I looked at this bill. But then I kind of started thinking about it a little more when we were just talking this morning. So how far down do I get to go if I find that rock? Now all of a sudden I see other rocks there, and they all have, now all of a sudden I'm the proud owner of a nice little fossil rock business, and all of a sudden I'm, I got a crew in there, and I'm, and they sell around for quite a bit of money. But if I've sold the mineral rights, how in this bill, when that contemplates that, how much do I have the right to have? I see crust of the earth and all that. Is there just a point of so far I can go, or it's all mine?
Co-Chairwoman Flitner or Representative Cost, do you want to answer that question?
I will let Senator Cost take a stab at it, and then I could comment, but I'll let him go there first.
Alrighty, Senator Cost.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll have to be really careful now because your co-chair is pretty sharp, so I might be in trouble here. Actually, there was a recommendation by the Wyoming Mining Association to possibly put some kind of a depth limit on it. They're saying somewhere probably around 50 to 100 feet. It's very rare that you're going to go much deeper than that. And so they didn't see it as a necessary, but they said it certainly could be put on if somebody saw that concern.
Any follow-up questions? Representative Flitner?
Madam Chairman, thank you. And I just would note too for Senator Guru and for the committee, in my neighborhood, in this part of the Bighorn Basin, it's not uncommon to find these. And we do have neighbors that have had a woolly mammoth on their property that's been in the process of being dug up. I'm not sure what the exact term is, but years and years ago, there were many that were found, and they were taken back to New York to a museum. And so the value is great, but I don't think they've had to go too deep to see those fossilized remains. I mean, they're typically just, right there. I mean, you see them as if you would stumble over them. That's how it first begins. And then I don't think they go like the site on my neighbor's ranch. I think, goodness, they probably only have gone maybe 8 or 12 feet below the surface.
Thank you.
Alrighty, any other questions for co-chairs? Alrighty. Rihanna, who do we have in the waiting room? Or I believe you said someone from the State Museum might be on the line to offer some comments as well.
That is correct. I'll go ahead and admit them, Chairwoman. All right, Chairwoman, I have promoted Aaron Campbell and Ken Hamilton.
Oh, my apologies. Ms. Campbell, if you want to identify yourself and offer some remarks. My microphone was off. I apologize.
Thank you, Chairwoman. My name is Erin Campbell. I am the Wyoming State Geologist and Director of the Wyoming State Geological Survey. And the State Geological Survey is the repository for state fossils. And so I had provided you with a chart showing the percentage of land that had state mineral rights and a private landowner surface rights, just to let you know how many fossils or what percentage of fossils could be affected by this bill, state fossils. And it's a very small amount. Only 1% of the land in Wyoming has private surface owner and a state mineral rights to it. And I just wanted to be here in case you had any questions for the Geologic Survey.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Questions from the committee for Ms. Campbell? Seeing none, thank you. And thank you for sending that email with the attachment. It was very helpful. All righty. And I believe we also have Ken Hamilton with Wyoming Farm Bureau. Is that right? Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Ken Hamilton with Wyoming Farm Bureau Federation. I'll be brief. Our organization supports this bill, and I look at this as something similar to what we did on split estate pore space legislation a number of years ago. I believe it just clarifies the ownership of this type of a thing before we get into a big fight, if you will, over who really does have access or has the ownership of that. So that's part of the reason why we support it. Be happy to answer any questions if anyone has any.
All righty. Questions for Mr. Hamilton, Senator Landon?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Ken, thanks for being here. With you and Aaron kind of providing the comment this morning, it strikes me that we do have landowners who contribute land to the state. In fact, we've got a pretty famous park right here by Casper, down by the Platte River. And when that foundation provided that land for the state park, if I understand this bill correctly, that if we found fossilized remains out there, those would still go back to whoever contributed that land, would they not? Unless it was specified in whatever document that transferred it to the state, it would have to say, we're also giving you, if you find a woolly mammoth, we're also giving that to you. Can you help me with that piece?
Madam
Hamilton,
Chairwoman?
did you hear his question fully? I lost his audio for a little bit.
I heard that question, and Senator Landon, I think that a lot of it would depend on how that title to that land was conveyed. I'm thinking I'm familiar with that piece of ground there, and I know in the past some of that stuff has been rather loose, but in that particular situation, I think that would be the first step. And I'm certainly not a land attorney, so nor did I stay at a Holiday Inn or anything like that. So if anyone else has any better information, I'd be happy to defer to them.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. Do any of the other participants in the meeting have a response? Senator Cost?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. On page 2, on lines 1 and 2, it says that basically it's vested in the owner of the surface estate unless otherwise conveyed by a clear and express grant or the Wyoming statute 74106. So if they didn't clearly state that in the donation, then it could be an issue where possibly it went back to the first. But as long as it was expressed clearly and I guess documented so that there was proof of who was going to get that, it would probably revert back to the original landowner.
Any follow-up questions? Senator Schuler?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I guess thank you. That brings up another question then, I guess. So if someone were to sell their property, but keep their mineral rights, so how does that affect this? They still, the owner, the person that bought the land would get the, go ahead. I could see you're starting to talk, Senator Cost.
Senator Cost?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. In the selling of the land and the document that said this land is now somebody else's, that would be their surface material. So they would receive that, not the previous. They would have to write that out of the document when they're selling the land. Donation of the land would probably present a different situation. But in the selling of the land, it would be clear that it goes to who is the proper owner of the land.
Any further questions? All righty, thank you to our participants. Public comment, or I should open this up. Is there anybody else additionally that would like to make a public comment on this bill? Okay, and I can't see your name. My eyesight's pretty good, but I can't quite see. Oh, I see Sarah Needles. There you are. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So,
and for the record, this is Sarah Needles from.
Yes, I'm the Deputy Director for State Parks Cultural Resources. The Cultural Resources Division is mine. And I have the State Historic Preservation Office and the State Archaeologist Office in my division. And I really don't have much to add other than just to say that, in terms of the work that we do, the fossils come under the State Geological Survey. We deal with anything that's human remains related. And my state archaeologist and I discussed this bill, and just in case there were any questions about whether or not, we thought this would impact us in a negative way, we definitely do not. The addition of the reference to the statute for human burials was really important. And because that's in there, this is in keeping with what we already practice. If it's private surface, the practice has always been that it's the ownership of the landowner. Any human remains found, or I'm sorry, not human remains, but artifacts, archaeological artifacts. And I just wanted to address, yes, typically these kind of sites are not going to be too far down under the surface. And so that's not a big concern. It all depends on where they're at and what the deposition of the soil is over time. But really, I think this is, we don't see any negatives to this bill at all. And I just wanted to be here in case there are any questions.
Questions for Ms. Needles? I do have one. So the reference to 74106, was a bill that I worked on a few years ago with Senator Boner, and that is the protection for the archaeological human remains and funerary objects, because a lot of times you would have Native people in particular who were buried with items that would take them into the next world. And so I'm curious if when you find those remains or these artifacts, if they're commingled, or if you see any concern that somehow the artifact would, or there might be an argument that a funerary object is also an artifact.
I'm sitting here trying to think of a situation where we've seen that. Really the only things that we find that are not kind of associated with a bigger archaeological site, or a place where they were maybe processing or preparing foods or living, would be like a cache, where they would cache a bunch of artifacts maybe to come back for later. But really, I mean, basically archaeologists really don't consider anything a funerary object unless it is found specifically in association with human remains.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Ms. Needles? Thank you. I see another person who just joined our screen. I can't see your name. I apologize, sir. Is it?
Madam
Yeah.
Chairman, I think it's Mr. Anderson.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson, welcome.
Yes, Madam Chair and committee members. I am actually the one that had Senator Koss sponsor this bill, and pretty controversy. Back in the 30s, Barnum Brown had discovered some fossils in the area, and back even then they had a tough decision trying to determine who owned those fossils. And this has been going on for a lot of years. My family purchased a ranch in about 1957. And they had severed 75% of the mineral rights off from this ranch. And so the family ended up with 25%. Later on in about 2000, somewhere around 2000, I discovered some fossil bones. We expanded on that, had some diggers in there. Eventually ended up that they'd found some pretty valuable stuff in there. And along the lines, my folks died and left an elaborate estate plan. This estate plan kind of turned sour with some of my family members. And also the previous owner from 1957 that had ended up with 75% of these fossil rights. He was the first one that started in, and his attorney advised him that in Wyoming, you're probably not going to win that because those fossils belong to the surface. So he gave up. But one of my family members did not give up, and they first tried tying that to the mineral rights too, which we didn't have a lot of them left. But then he eventually tried to sever these fossils from the land. And about that time, we listed this ranch for sale, and my realtor told me, if you have that or if you have that clause on there that those fossils are severed from that ranch land, we'll never get that place sold because you're just opening it up to everybody and anybody. And as families split, they could give them another percent, and you might end up with a 1% here and 2% there, and the people that own the land might have the majority of it. But it gets to be real problematic. And in our court case, Dr. Sundell, this might answer some of the questions you had. Dr. Sundell from the Tate, I guess he's a curator of the Tate Museum in Casper. He testified that fossils aren't something that you actually mine. You don't know where they're at. You walk the surface of the ground until you find them. And then you may have to dig into the surface to extract whatever's there. But he says they're not something you actually can go look for, like oil or gold or something like that. So I think this region of shale, Wyoming, is really rich in fossils, and that runs from the Montana line all the way down to Casper, I believe. Morrison Formation sticks out. Lots of ranch land along here. I think it's very important that we keep these surface rights where they belong. And gravel is another one that's been controversial over the years. They brought that up several times, whether it's a mineral or not. Even though it may contain limestone, it's still not considered a mineral. And fossils are the same way. They're made up of various minerals. And in our court case, that was explained pretty thoroughly, whether they're valuable minerals that you can mine, such as limestone or coal or whatever. So I think that was the basis of our bill here, and trying to firm this up a little bit so everybody doesn't end up in court with their families. It makes it a lot easier if families aren't involved in something like this. So I would take any questions from any of you.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Questions from the committee? I have one. Mr. Anderson, and I think maybe I know we've got someone from the Wyoming Mining Association on there as well, but again, just kind of thinking this through, it says that if you're transferring your land to someone else, the assumption is that the fossil ownership goes with that, unless you write it out when you convey that to someone else. And so with split owners, the dominant estate is the mineral estate and the surface is the subservient, right? So I am a little curious about how this would work if you were to transfer your land to someone else, but carved out the fossil right to a different person, and then you've got a mineral right underneath. I'm wondering where that fits in to the dominant versus the Serbian estate. Does that make sense?
Well, I might be able to clear that up. In our district court case we had, they pretty much firmed it up that you own the surface, you own the fossils. So I don't know how much further I can take it than that.
Okay. That doesn't quite answer my question, but maybe we'll find someone that we can have that point maybe made more clear. Any other questions for Mr. Anderson? Thank you for being with us, and thanks for bringing this issue to our attention. It's an important one.
Thank you for your time.
You bet. Righty, I see someone from the Wyoming Mining Association.
Good morning, Madam Chairman. I am Pat Joyce. I'm the Assistant Director of the Wyoming Mining Association. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to testify on this bill this morning. Senator Cost had brought this to our attention last fall, and we've had several of our mine members take a look at this and give us some feedback on it. Overall, we're in support of the bill. I think there's been some very good questions brought up this morning, the difference between the minerals and who owns the fossils. The one thing that happens, we talk about who finds these fossils, and of course, all of us that have had ranches and that know that we find them on ranches. We do find them on their excavating for roads and byways or right-of-ways and that. But the other area that finds them is our energy industry. In the mines, we run into this a lot. Our bentonite mines in particular up in the northwest part of the state have run into this a lot. And that we've had them take a real close look at this. One of the things that we haven't really pushed on this, but we would be interested in seeing if it doesn't foul up the whole language on this, is that there be a depth limit put on this. I think there is still some question out there about whether or not this goes down 2 feet or 50 feet or 200 feet. And I would appreciate some discussion on that particular point. The thing that this bill does do that we appreciate is that when our mines, and I think I would speak for oil and gas as well, once they're in the process of, they've done their permitting, they're ready to go out and start their excavation, and they run into something like this gives them some clarification that hopefully will define who owns the fossils, what we need to do as mining entities to move around it, and also hopefully will keep everybody out of the courts. That can hold up an investment in a mine for years if the wrong situation arises and isn't handled, doesn't have, and hasn't been addressed ahead of time. So with that, we support the bill. We appreciate Senator Kost's work on this and his reaching out to the mining industry. And I think would finish my comments at this point, Madam Chairman, and I would stand for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Joyce. Any questions for Ms. Joyce? Senator Guru?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Ms. Joyce, you mentioned the example of being out, just out in your bentonite fields, and when you're out and you're digging in the surface there and you run into a fossil or run into fossils, what do you inform the landowner of this, or is this something that, is this something that gets worked out contractually beforehand, or how does that work?
I wish I had one of my mine guys on here with me, and I can get back to you with an answer on that. It's my understanding that once they discover something, they stop, and it has to be addressed. As you know, they aren't all visible on the surface.
Right.
And I think to the chairwoman's point too, then we've got a lot of especially up in the northwest part of the state, we have a lot of funerary situations where it has to be addressed as well when they're found. So it's my understanding mining stops, they stop and work it out. But I would appreciate the chance to get back to you with words from the mines, exactly how they handle that.
That'd be great. I know YDOT, for example, has teams that when they hit something, when they're working and when the contractor's working, they inform YDOT, and YDOT has a team that goes out and takes a look, and I think hooked up with the state archaeologist. And so I didn't know how that works. And if I could follow up, Madam Chairman.
Yep, Senator, and do you have your hand on your microphone? Your sound is a little muffled.
Oops, sorry.
There you go.
Better?
Senator.
One last question on the depth. If I've heard 50 feet, I've heard a couple other depths. The Mining Association wanted a depth provision in this. What's the call? What do you see as the number?
Ms. Joyce?
Madam Chairman, Senator Guru, it's been advised to me by one of our mines to ask for 50 to 100 feet. If we said 100 feet, I think that should cover most situations.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Any further committee members? Any other questions for Ms. Joyce? All righty, seeing none. Do we have anybody else LSO for public comment?
Not at this time, Chairwoman Ellis.
Okay, public comment is closed. Committee members, what's your pleasure?
Madam Chairman, I'd move the bill.
Okay. Senator Landon has moved it. Senator Grew has seconded it. Discussion? Alrighty, senators, how about we work the bill page by page? And let me pull up my copy right here. Alrighty, at this time, does anyone have any suggested amendments for page 1? Any suggested amendments for page 2? Any suggested amendments for page 3? Alrighty, senators, I don't know if we want to tackle it at this time, but I think I'd need to work with LSO on the verbiage, but a conceptual amendment I'd like to offer would be somewhere on page 2, inserting some language saying that the depth is up to 100 feet. And I don't have that exact language penciled out right now. Is there a second? Okay, we've got Senator Grew and Senator Schuler seconding. Any discussion on that concept? Sorry, senators, I saw all your hands go up. Were you voting or was there discussion? Okay, seeing no discussion, Senator Landon.
Madam Chairman, I for now at least, that's an amendment that I think I'll resist. I just have a pretty strong notion of that property right, and have no idea how deep these things can go, but it just feels better to me that it would belong to the landowner. And so at this time, I'm just not convinced we need to put anything on there, any sort of depth restriction or whatever. I'm just comfortable with where the bill is. Thanks.
Thank you, Senator. Any other comments on the proposed amendment? Senator Schuler?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, I like the idea of adding the depth. I think about on our ranch. I'm just going to throw out a scenario that happened. My dad actually had a construction company and was digging in an area and found a number of really incredible artifacts. And it was probably, I want to say, about 20 feet deep. Beyond that, and again, I think this was probably an area where some of our native tribes that were in the area probably camped. And we talked a little bit about that. Of course, we, got folks over from our museum here in our area to come and take a look at them. But, I think 100 feet is pretty safe. I really do. And, I'm thinking how deep 20 feet seemed like to me. Of course, I was a kid when this was all going on, but So I think maybe we need that depth. I understand, the good senator from Casper's, trepidation with it, but I just like the idea of having that entered into the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on the amendment, Senator Guru?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, I was just gonna wait and talk to some folks about this before I talked about a depth amendment, but I'm okay with it conceptually now with Senator Schuler's comments. But I do respect Senator Landon and his comments as well. And so I think I'm going to kind of string along with the chair on this one and see if we can come up with something conceptually, but I'm going to talk to a few folks and try to figure out what the answer might be. So I'll be in support of the concept motion.
Okay, thank you, senators. And to be a little clearer, I think it'll likely actually happen on page 1, line 14. So it would say the inserting the word after state, maybe up to 100 feet. And so it would say the ownership of any fossil artifact or non-fossilized animal remains discovered in the strata below the surface lands and waters of the state up to 100 feet is vested in the owner of the surface estate. So that I think is likely where that would take place, but I'd like to visit with LSO. Alrighty, any other discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. Okay, 3. All those opposed? Please raise your hand. I see 2. The amendment passes 3-2. Any other amendments proposed? Senators, I think that I would like to visit with Senator Cost a little bit more on what the right is of a person who maybe is just vested with that ownership right of the fossil. Because I can see an instance where you have a landowner transferring or conveying their ranch to a different person entirely, but they want to preserve those fossils and give those to their children. And so I think conceptually how that could work would be the new landowner would, if they find those fossils, have a duty to provide those to the children. But that's not quite spelled out. And I don't know that that gives the children a right to go back onto that land to search for fossils if they'd like. So I would like a little bit more clarification on what kind of new right we're creating here. And also to be very clear that we're not trying to upset the current split estate structure of, who's got the dominant estate and who doesn't. But I think some of that needs to be cleared up. And I don't know the answer to those. So I'm not going to bring an amendment, but that is something I am very concerned about. Senator Landon. We can't hear you, sir.
Thank you. I apologize. Madam Chairman, I suspected that would probably be, working around in your legal mind. It strikes me that this probably does create a piece of our green books in which there'll be some legal wrangles, because you do have potential to separate that surface estate, but there again, I wonder if more is not better. On a bill like this. I think that is probably what you pay folks who are in the legal profession to do. But no, I get it. I've been thinking about the same thing this morning, Madam Chairman, and whether or not that adds to the bill later on, I don't know. But it feels like to me the bill is probably okay. And then it's really up to when you sell that land. If you say, I'm going to sell you the land, but I want to keep any of the stegosauruses that are underneath this surface, that creates all kinds of split surface estate stuff that you're gonna end up in legal stuff. So I don't know. It feels like maybe the bill lands where it needs to for the green books, but I'll be interested to hear what you find out, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Any other comments? My goal isn't, I don't have a view one way or another, but I do think if the goal is to avoid litigation, then it probably warrants some discussion and to hopefully avoid that. So I really, what I want to know is if it creates a right of access. If you have a fossil ownership, but no longer a right onto that land, are you trespassing if you want to go look for fossils? And if we want to make it clear that no, it's just the instance where the new landowner finds fossils, they have a duty to tell the fossil owners that we found them and that's where they belong. It's just some of that I think needs to probably could be made more clear. So I'll visit with Senator Cost offline, and maybe we'll talk about the potential for a committee of the whole amendment. So, and if anyone has a burning desire to be involved in that conversation, please let me know and we'll loop you in. Okay, any other questions? Question on the bill? All those in favor that when the committee of the whole, just kidding. All those in favor that the TRW votes in favor of moving this to the floor, please raise your hand.
Let's roll, Madam Chairman, I think we need a roll call on this.
More coffee. A roll call vote, please.
Senator Guru,
Aye.
Senator Landon,
Aye.
Senator Salazar,
Aye.
Senator Schuler,
Aye.
Chairwoman Ellis.
Aye.
5 ayes.
All righty, committee, and Senator Cost, we'll look forward to you explaining this bill to the Senate when we meet in session next week. Committee members, that's all we had on our agenda today. Thank you for being part of this. Any other comments before we adjourn? Seeing none, thanks. Oh, Senator Guru?
Just one quick comment. You know, I have to honestly say I've been kind of vacillating back and forth with all this COVID stuff, and going down to Cheyenne, it kind of gives me a little bit of trepidation. But, you know, we started the meeting this morning, Madam Chair, and I saw Don sitting there at the desk. It got me excited to come down. I can't wait to see him. Good to see you, Don.
Yeah. Don's on board, and you know, we've got nice plexiglass dividers in the committee room, and I think we're gonna make it work, Senator. So thank you. I look forward to seeing all of you in person as well.
All right.
Oh,
Thank
Senator
you.
Landon?
So, Madam Chairman, I'm just curious, you having chaired this morning's meeting from the room in which we'll be meeting as we go forward, but are we to expect this kind of meeting all the way through March? In my understanding that we will be able to accept virtual testimony, or how's that going to work?
That's a good question, Senator. I don't want to get it wrong, so let me visit with LSO to make sure I understand what the plan is. But you know, I think there is definitely a value in having these kind of hybrid meetings. I know, you know, for the gentleman who just testified, that's a long drive to Cheyenne just to offer, you know, a few minutes of remarks. So I do think there's a place for allowing more virtual testimony. But I see we've got Miss Brianna on the line or on the screen.
Yeah, Chairwoman Ellis, that is correct. Members of the committee, the entire session will allow members of the public and members of the legislature to participate remotely. So every single committee meeting will have this hybrid component, and members of the public will be able to testify and register just like they have been the last few weeks. And then in addition, the floor proceedings also will be streamed on YouTube as well. So it'll have the entire session moving forward.
Ready, Senator Landon?
Sorry to draw this out, Madam Chairman, but this is more, and I appreciate it, Brianna. Thank you for that. This is more on a personal note. I actually checked with some of our Capitol Club folks who informed me that it would be proper to refer to you as Madam Chairman. But I wanted to ask if you had a preference as to what you would like from your committee when we do refer to you.
Oh, thank you, Senator Landon. You know, I know that some people don't like being called Mr. Chair or Madam Chair. I don't really object to any of it. I think Chairwoman or Madam Chairman is fine, or Madam Chair, that's all fine with me. I think I've got 99 problems, and being called a chair ain't one. So I'm pretty laid back on that.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thanks for asking. All righty, committee members, thanks for your time today. We'll see you next week in Cheyenne. Bye.